Little producer privilege here. As that theme was playing, I could see Brent jamming out to our intro music.
I always get pumped up when I hear that. I'm not going to lie.
This is Around the League from UGAsports.com, presented by our friends at Connor Grading and Landscaping and ASW Distillery. We'll tell you about them later in the show. I'm Dayne Young. That's Brent Rollins, who was jamming out. You couldn't see it. I could. It was worth it. Coach Donnan is here as well. He is the College Football Hall of Famer. He knows more about football than anyone I know. And Coach, this week in the SEC, a little bit lighter slate, only 5 games. We're going to start with the CBS primetime game, 3:30 Eastern time. Ole Miss, now underdogs on the road. They're undefeated, but going to Baton Rouge. And last I've seen, Coach, LSU, a 2-point favorite to upset the Rebels of Ole Miss.
Yeah, they're giving a lot of credit for their home field. But, they did play well against Mississippi State. Didn't do very well at Tennessee at home. But I think just the fact they played offensive tenacity against the Gators really it's got everybody thinking this might be a down there, because they do have some talented players and they're getting the ball to some of these receivers now. The thing about Ole Miss defense is Auburn scored 34 on them, so that makes you wonder a little bit about strength of schedule. But you can say the same thing about Georgia's strength of schedule too. So a case of we're getting down to the nitty gritty now. Every game's going to be huge in the grand scheme of things. And I got to think that all of a sudden LSU thinks they're world beaters. How about you, Brent?
I think they feel pretty good because, for one thing, they finally got Kayshon Boutte the ball. 6 catches, 115 yards, including, I think, a 40 or 41 yarder. I mean, Daniels with the arm as well as the legs, like, they probably feel pretty good about themselves. They get this game at home. But, Dayne, I think you should have introduced them as the first place Ole Miss Rebels, because they are currently in first place in the SEC West yeah, and control their own destiny in a way. But like Coach said, the schedule with Ole Miss, so front-loaded with the sort of get-right games, and now they got 5 straight sort of in conference and in their own division. But the next 2 weeks, at LSU, at A&M. Are you for real? Can you set up what might be like one of the biggest games at Ole Miss in a long time, which would be home for Bama in 3 or 4 weeks? Can that, game day would probably be there, all that sort of thing. Like, can you get that set up? But I just personally watching Ole Miss, I can watch them all day long offensively. Their running game, with the way it uses misdirection, the way it puts defenses in conflict, uses the quarterback, always has answers. Like, it's just fun to watch their running game. And I think this is just going to be that sort of physical and which team runs the ball better in this game.
And this is one of those, to me, Coach, that historically, last 20 years, if you think of defensive backs that are excellent in the SEC, you think of LSU and Florida. Well, if LSU has a weakness on this defense, it's in the defensive backfield. It's actually their defensive front that is a bit more stout. So I think that may neutralize some of this rushing attack from Ole Miss. Brent, what do you think?
I mean, I possible. But, I don't know how, just looking at the way Ole Miss runs offense, they put things and put people in conflict so consistently. Like, there's, leaving guys unblocked, using misdirection. The quarterback is always a threat to run the football. It's just hard to stop their running game. But like you said, with the defensive front, with Ojulari and some of the others, Roy, that LSU has, I think, like you said, can Mingo, after not having a catch against Auburn, Jonathan Mingo, can he get back on track and become like big play guy like he was against Vanderbilt a few weeks ago?
Because if I'm scheming up against what LSU or against what Ole Miss can do, I'm saying I'm going to make Jackson Dart try to beat me, because I haven't seen him have to do that yet and be the hero for the offense. He relies on those running backs. He relies on those skill guys. I think if I'm LSU, I'm saying we're going to make you try to throw over the top on us. And if you beat us that way, fine. We're willing to deal with that.
I think it's going to be a great game. That's for sure. Like I would legit want to be able to sit down and watch this entire game.
I do as well, and we'll get Coach Donnan back in here in just a moment. And may have had an internet blip. And there's a shot that you hear my child, whose babysitter is on the way, just around the corner. So if you hear a little yelling from the door, she's just fine. She wants to join the show.
Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that ever.
I've heard your dog before. It's a very similar principle.
I had to bribe the dog today. By the way, I bribed the dog today. Like gave the dog a bone, like because she wouldn't want to go out. She didn't want to go outside at all. Like she was like, "Hey, I want to play." So I'm like, "All right, take the bone, go chill. I talk, you be quiet."
And I'm not being an irresponsible parent. I have eyes on my child right here. I hope people understand that because I don't want to get Twitter things. But get off your stupid podcast and
take care of your kid.
I hear it. Fine. Ole Miss and LSU, again, that is a 2-point favorite for the Bayou Bengals down in Baton Rouge. And Brent, I guess we should move on to Mississippi State and Alabama. And I have no idea if Mississippi State's any good. I thought for 3 weeks they were, and now it seems like they're not, and it doesn't make any sense to me. And Coach Donnan is back with us. We're moving on to Mississippi State and Alabama. Brent, Alabama's a 21-point favorite at home. It seems probably appropriate considering what the offense looked like, but Mississippi State, in theory, should be able to move the ball on them, right?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because Alabama last week against Tennessee had the lowest coverage grade in the entire era of PFF in a single game that they've had, 38. Like last year against A&M was the only thing that's even come close to that, and it wasn't even really that close. So, and I've talked to some people in and around the league, former coaches, current coaches, like, and the theme you hear is, hey, take the A off the helmet and the jersey, and that's a very average secondary. You just don't see different makers in their secondary. So, and obviously what Mississippi State wants to do. But I think the line is appropriate because Mississippi State is 0-2 on the road and just, completely fell apart against LSU in the fourth quarter. And then, last week against Kentucky, even just struggled a little bit. So I don't know, Coach, what do you think about Miss State at Alabama?
Well, they've had terrible luck against Alabama. Both games that Leach has coached against them. Talking about the Bama secondary, first thing you got to do is get lined up. They were so misaligned so many times, and it's like somebody needed to send them a Western Union that Tennessee was going to go fast, and they just had so many easy layup throws. I mean, Hooker did a great job, but Hyatt's enshrined in the Hall of Fame there at Neyland Stadium. One game, 5 touchdowns and 6 catches, and it just befuddles me to watch the tape. I went back and watched it and studied it, and certainly Tennessee deserves a lot of credit, but Alabama, with the penalties they had and the misalignments, you're going to get a lot of teams are going to hurt them. Ole Miss is going to run the ball down their throat the way they can run the ball against those looks. They just have angles, and Tennessee was very content to run the ball on second down, which Alabama thought they were going to be throwing it, and they killed them running the ball enough that their passing game was great. But getting back to Mississippi State, just looked to me like they went to the races or something up there. Their mind wasn't in that game. They got knocked off the ball. Very good running game by Kentucky, and that's the way you do it against a Leach team. You get ahead of them, make them play from behind, and they have a hard time on the down and distance. So, but you never know against this Alabama team. If that Will Rogers gets hot, those receivers can get open against that secondary, no question.
Go ahead. You're muted, Dane. Oh.
Sorry. We always talk about how Mike Leach gets the most out of a little bit lesser talent in some cases, but it does seem like, Brent, that he has these games like last week where they just don't show up. They don't perform to the level that they have been the previous weeks. There's just not a level of consistency there that you need in the SEC West.
Yeah, and especially for them, what is their hallmark? Their hallmark is, hey, I'm going to complete the 3rd and 6 pass all day long and stay on the field. And they just couldn't do it against Kentucky. I think it was 3 of 11 on third downs. They were 0 for something, 0 for 6 maybe on 3rd and 7+. Kentucky went back and they went away from the running game because of how the game was going. They only had 9 rushing attempts in the game. And one of those was the first play of the game. I think they got like 15 yards on the first play of the game. But it's Kentucky looked like they went back to what we had talked about initially with the, hey, we're going to rush 3 for the most part, drop 8, keep everything in front, and then get a little more aggressive on third down. And it worked to the nth degree against Mississippi State last week. And he's back again.
I am. I'm running traffic here. Yeah, I'm back, and I want to mention our friends at Connor Grading and Landscaping before we move on to our next game, because I don't know if y'all have noticed, but as I get up with my children and get them off to school, some frigid mornings, some frosty mornings, and so you want to make sure your yard is looking good, and this is a perfect time to do any work, so that way when the spring comes around, you are good to go. You need to call our friends over at Connor Grading and Landscaping. Check them out on their website at connorgrading.com. Brent, I check in with you every week. What's the status of your lawn that they're helping you with?
My day job is like taking over my life over the past few weeks. I was in New Jersey last week, and once I actually get a chance to breathe, which is hopefully starting next week, I'm going to get things taken care of. That's for sure.
So this commercial is for you, and it's check out our friends at connorgrading.com, whether it's moving some earth, whether it's some landscaping, just some ideas to have some features in your yard that will make you the envy of the neighborhood in terms of your home tailgate or even just your setup come springtime when it does get a little bit warmer. I think this is the perfect time to get work done on your yard, and the folks at Connor Grading and Landscaping are the perfect people to help you with that. All right, guys, let's move on to our...
One more thing, Dane, before we do that about Bama, just rewatching that game. Like Coach talked about rewatching that game. And I've rewatched a lot of it, not the entirety of it, kind of skipped through certain pieces. It's amazing what Alabama asks of Bryce Young. Like, he has to be Superman for them to be good. And he does and he is that. Like, if you take him and Gibbs off that team, which you could say that about a lot of teams, yes, but what they ask those two players to do and how much of the load they have to carry, like the rest of their roster, now obviously what Will Anderson is, but the rest of their roster just doesn't feel very Alabama-y just because of, and I think they've gotten away a little bit offensively from what they should be. And like I said, asking way too much of Bryce Young, and he's Superman and he's able to keep them in games and, should have won the game for them. But I could see them, possibly getting another loss in the next month or so.
I mean, they've almost had 2 up to this point with Texas and Texas A&M.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to have trouble. They're going to have trouble with both Ole Miss's quarterback and with LSU's quarterback because of their mobility and the fact that their linebackers are just having trouble in space when you get the ball out there. And you saw the way everybody that's played them hurts them a little bit. And you're not going to win a lot of games when you give up 52 points, but also you can't count on scoring 49 either. So just like Brent was talking about, they do require a lot from Bryce Young, but certainly the fact that you got to help them a little bit with your play calling, and at the end of the game, it's been well chronicled. Hey, run the clock and make them use their timeouts or help your kicker, but can't really get on Nick too bad about his career, but that wasn't one of his better performances as far as clock management.
Offense wasn't their issue, Coach, but I did just kind of have a question for you. That Bryce Young is spectacular, and I'm not in any way saying like quarterback deals, but Milroe in the open field is one of the more dynamic runners in the country as well. Would you try to find a way to get the ball in his hands, even with Bryce Young as your starting quarterback?
It's just hard to do that. Every snap you take him out, I mean, you don't know what Milroe's going to do. You don't know how much he's going to take care of the ball. I mean, that's how they almost, lost the game before with the turnovers to A&M. So he certainly could be used in the spot like in the red zone or something, because Gibbs is really dynamic running the ball, and he's got very good acceleration. He had a crucial drop there at the end of the game, though. If he catches that angle route, he's down to the 25 minimum. So, but can't worry about Bama. That's their problem. They deserve to lose that game.
I agree.
They've deserved to lose a couple of these games so far this season, and we'll see how they handle the month of December.
Not to mention 17 penalties. I mean, the last time I saw a team get 17 penalties, it was at the Burlington Elks Club when I was playing Little League football, I think. So,
Well, I mentioned with Mississippi State that it's just unpredictable what they're going to be. You can kind of say the same thing about Texas A&M and South Carolina. Texas A&M coming in 3-3 going into Columbia, and Brent A&M a 3-point favorite on the road. But I really don't think you like any of the quarterbacks playing in this game.
No, not at all. And it's one of those games where it's like who's going to survive in a way. But hey, Beamer ball 3 in a row, 3-game winning streak. Going to the bye and feeling good about themselves. And what's amazing, like you look at their schedule, and granted, look at Rattler's passing grades in the sort of 4 actual games they played. Georgia State 51.5, Arkansas 41.5, UGA 48.6, and then Kentucky 42.1. He hasn't played well, but they've won games. And can they actually get on a run? Because A&M at home, then they get Missouri at home, and then they go at Vandy. Like they could be feeling great about themselves, just to be kind of dunked on, I think, in the end with Tennessee and Clemson at the end of their schedule. But I do think, if you like running backs, like the 2 running backs in this, and you like teams that have explosive running backs, the 2 running backs in this game are fun to watch. Marshawn Lloyd is really starting to get rolling for South Carolina, and then A-Chain is phenomenal as a back for A&M. But like you said, if A&M goes and sort of lays an egg, how hot is Jim Post like each and every week? Does it get any hotter? Like, can it get any hotter after that kind of loss? I don't know, but it's going to be interesting to see, and kind of a coin flip game. Who gets any sort of whose quarterback turns it over the least?
yeah, I could see a situation where they might go with a freshman quarterback, built for the future. They certainly he's got a lot of pop in his arm, and they showed how they could throw the ball okay with Max in there. I don't think he's going to be ready anytime soon, but the situation is such, if you just put their first 44 out there and compared both teams' personnel, there would be no doubt that A&M would win that hands down as far as the eyeball test, as far as the ratings. But the way that South Carolina's playing, they're getting coached well. They're playing within their limits. Their special teams are helping them. And in spite of their quarterback, they're finding a way not to lose games. I mean, they had 2 lay-down games there, after they lost those 2, but against Georgia and Arkansas. But certainly the win against Kentucky was monumental for Beamer. And they're on their way. If they can get those 2, you got to think they should get for sure Vanderbilt, maybe Missouri. But, Florida, they got them last year. Florida's 3-11 in their last 14 conference games. Hard to believe that. But I just think identity-wise, the longer Carolina can get the crowd in the game and they can stay with A&M and A&M have that doubt on the sideline, you just can't think that right now there's a lot of guys there on A&M's roster that are thinking, what in the world are we doing except this NIL money we're getting? I mean, they're just not getting much love from their fans, from anybody else. And that would be a team that, if they do make a bowl, would probably set the record for the most guys that sit out of a bowl game, I would think. So you will see what happens.
I think you guys nailed it. This is kind of one of those reputation games. And coming into the season, it was, Texas A&M has the talent of an Alabama or a Georgia and it's upper echelon SEC. When you lose to South Carolina, you're not upper echelon SEC. And I don't care what your talent is. Especially
after the way they just completely destroyed them last year. I mean, that was a game where South Carolina had less than 100 yards at A&M last year, and everybody was talking about what in the world are they going to do. And then all of a sudden they come back and beat Florida at home, just inexplicably with that win against Florida and Auburn. And then they were rolling and then got that win against North Carolina. And that game against A&M was kind of the signature game for being as low as you could be and then making a comeback. You got to give Beamer and his staff a lot of credit, because from that point on, that team has kind of felt like they're better than they are, and they've played like it.
They definitely have. And a team that is as good as I've always thought they are the folks over at ASW Distillery. And this week, I want to tell you and use my broadcaster voice that I work on from time to time. I want to tell you about the Fiddler Georgia Heartwood, because this is the bourbon that I have been imbibing on during the post-game overreaction show after Georgia play. So the Fiddler Georgia Heartwood Bourbon from ASW Distillery, the same foraged high wheat bourbon as our flagship Fiddler Unison. Finished on the staves of Georgia oak that our distilling team harvested and hand-charred. The 45% wheat content is unique for bourbons, leading to the sweet, smooth profile despite its high proof. Notes of caramel, maple, toffee, and clove. Thank you.
Well done, voiceover Dayne. Well done, voiceover Dayne.
So this bourbon has actually won awards at the San Francisco World Spirits Competition, which I really don't know what that means other than it's really good bourbon, because I don't know what all the spirit competitions are. But that's why my friend Chad over at ASW Distillery is going to tell me about all the different competitions that they're in. What I do know, because I've watched sports my whole life, you get the gold in something, it means you're better than a lot of other people at it. And I can tell you the ASW bourbon, the Fiddler Georgia Heartwood, is fantastic. You should get it yourself. Look for it wherever you find your spirits. 2 more games, guys. Vanderbilt and Missouri. This is the cellar dweller of the SEC. Missouri is a better team than Vandy, Coach, but does Vandy have a shot here? Missouri 14-point favorite.
Yeah, the thing about Missouri, they had an off week, and they had to look at their program and see where they are and figure that their defense is probably better than they thought it was going to be, and their offense hadn't stepped it up. Self-analyzation is really critical when you're trying to win a game and get into the stuff you can do well. You ought to be able to do some things against Vanderbilt. The one thing that was disappointing to me in Vanderbilt was how many times, of course, they were out-athleted against Georgia for sure, but how many times they were in position to make plays and never made them. I mean, just routine plays. They didn't make any of them. And then throwing the ball and catching it, they didn't do very well either because they had some guys open. You're going to see people complete passes against Georgia. I mean, they got some issues back there. But the thing about Missouri, it's now or never for Drinkwitz. I mean, he's against the wall. I mean, everybody out there is doubting him. You got the Cook who's saying he looked at every throw that he threw this year and he's analyzed them and he's going to come back and do well. What they're going to do with Burden, who knows? They haven't done much with him yet, but Missouri's got better players. I mean, when you look at what they got compared to Vanderbilt, but, Vanderbilt all of a sudden looks at themselves and say, look, we're better than we played against Georgia. We just can't go on the road and shoot a 0 like that. But I would think Missouri should win this game, but I got no confidence in either one of those teams. How about you, Brent?
I agree. And that's the reason they're both 0-3 in the conference. They're a reason sort of where they are, both on 3-game losing streaks. The interesting thing for me is always like, I wonder what that bye week or that sort of open week is like when you've lost 3 games in a row and then you go into the open week. Like, how deflating is it? Do you, like, you as a coach, would you say, hey, boys, go get away from football for a week or for 3 days or something like that? How would you treat an open week after 3 straight losses?
I think the biggest thing is you always change a losing game and you never change a winning game. Whatever we thought was going to win for us hasn't been going for us. So let's look at what we did well, look at the situations that we reacted to favorably and augment those. And the ones that we did poorly on, let's find a way to at least be competitive in it and not, they were in the game against Florida. I mean, they had a shot on the road to beat the Gators. And they just don't have that little oomph to get over the hump. Nobody makes any big plays, particularly in a passing game. The running game's okay. Defensively, I've been impressed with the way they stop the run and they're around the ball. That guy's doing a good job putting their kids in a position to win as compared to the last couple of years when they were running some of that pro stuff and just got out aligned and they just gave up too many easy. They got a good kicker. He missed one against Auburn, but, I mean, use him. Only thing I would say is Vandy should be the cure for him. I mean, it should be a game. If you don't beat Vandy, the Mayflower truck's going to be there. I mean, nothing against Vandy, but what makes you think you're going to beat the rest of the teams on your schedule? If you still got to play Tennessee, got Kentucky, don't they? I don't see them winning any more games if all of a sudden they lose that one. South Carolina's a toss-up right now, but if they lose, you got to figure Carolina's a favorite.
Yeah, it's already unlikely that Missouri is going to be going bowling. You lose to Vandy, it's for sure. You're not going bowling, so that Mayflower truck would be there a little earlier in December for Coach Drinkwitz at that point. Final game in the SEC this week, Tennessee, before coming to before playing Kentucky and then coming to Athens, they get UT Martin at home. Not even a line on this game, but Coach, sometimes in these FCS games, you get a little sleepy after a big win. Maybe not quite as impressive. I don't think it's going to matter with Tennessee, but maybe they're not quite as sharp as they were against Alabama. I'm curious to see how they respond to their national headline.
Well, here's the thing that makes me do things for around the league that I would never do. I looked up Tennessee Martin to see what their record was. They're 4-2. They're ranked 15th in the in the FCS. They won the OVC last year. They got a quarterback that can pound the rock out down the field. I mean, they're almost 300 yards a game passing. So even if you're throwing against the air, that's hard to do. So they'll get some shots against Tennessee. I mean, Tennessee's secondary is not bad. It's terrible. I mean, that's why they blitz so much, just to put the heat on you. I mean, 450 yards to Florida, over 400 to Alabama. So this will be a lay-down win, no question. But I think some of these Tennessee Martin kids will go in there and have a lot of fun, because you got to believe that the balls are overlooking them. And I look for them to score a couple times on them. I really think they can hit some shots on them.
I agree. I think they might, get into the teens, at least from a point perspective. And like you said about Tennessee's secondary, 128nd right now in the FBS in terms of coverage grade, Tennessee's defense. And also, like Coach said, with the blitzing, they're one of the top five teams in the Power Five in terms of percentage blitz. But what's interesting about Tennessee is obviously things are going as well as it possibly could be, and sort of state of the program as good as it possibly can be year two with Heupel, when not much was expected initially. But we think about Tennessee, and you hear the Hendon Hooker talk, and you see the receiver with 5 touchdowns. You think, oh, they're throwing it all over the place. Not really. Like their game is still a running game centric. Their offense is still running game centric, to where, all right, once you finally commit to playing the run, we're going to take the shots over your head. But I thought I was just kind of looking at these numbers and thought it was interesting. Attempts per game, dropbacks and attempts per game right now. Hendon Hooker has 33.5 dropbacks, about 28.5 attempts per game. Stetson Bennett, 35 dropbacks, 33 attempts per game. So Georgia's throwing it quite significantly more on average than Tennessee. And I think from an outside perspective, much wouldn't really think about it. But I do like Tennessee's offensive structure will always give defenses issues because of how they spread the field, tight splits along the offensive line, and just taking the layups, the quick throws, the quick slants if you play too wide, or taking the deep shots, sort of three-pointers, and he's just hitting them. And really, when you look at sort of statistics-wise, that's really the only difference between Hooker and Bennett, is that he's hit those deep shots and Bennett necessarily hasn't this year.
Yeah, Bennett doesn't get quite the layups either because of the way people play us, But I think the biggest thing to me is Tennessee just puts so much pressure on you to line up, and your conditioning has to be superior because you can't sub, because the only way you can sub is if they sub, and that really hurts you, or unless you fake an injury, which some teams have done. They're bearing down on that a little bit, but the maximum splits put pressure on you to play more man coverage than you want to play if you're not a good man team. And then the running game is really significant right now. I mean, you look at Jeff Lebby, who was at UCF and now at Oklahoma. He had a quarterback last week. They had almost 600 yards with that Gabriel kid and a quarterback when they only had 200 the last 2 weeks. So they really put a lot of pressure on you. And we'll see how, Kentucky going to get them next week.
That's going to be interesting.
They're going to try.
That's going to be a very interesting game.
Keep the ball away from them. That's the way to do it. But, everybody talks about, well, you got to score with them. But, hey, if they don't have the ball, that helps you. But we'll talk about that more next week. But you got to give – when you think where Tennessee was when they hired Heupel, I mean, they were really struggling to get a coach. And then White went with his guy that he knew from UCF. And the transfers they've had and everything they've done about that team, just outstanding. And particularly their defensive improvement as far as getting off the field. They're a lot better on third down than they were last year, but they're still terrible against the pass.
Two things for Tennessee. One, super smart scheduling to put UT Martin in between Alabama and your November stretch. That gives you the best chance of success. So I don't even know which AD did that, but kudos to them because that's a smart play. Two, I still find Tennessee's performance in Baton Rouge to be more impressive than its game against Alabama, because you're talking an Alabama missed kick is the difference. And all this perception of Tennessee being a top 5 superpower or Tennessee not being quite their own par. And look, they were really impressive against Alabama. I'm excited to see what the rest of the season is for Tennessee. I think they're getting a bit too much hype right now.
We'll see how it goes. I mean, Georgia's definitely getting too much hype. I mean, we played against the Ducks and did good, but we got some issues on defense for sure. And I think Brent's talked about it. With covering people is going to be huge in that game. And offensively, there's no big plays. I mean, we got to find a way to make some of those because you're going to stop yourself sometime. But again, 17 penalties helps any team win, plus the crowd, everything about it. Tennessee got to come down here and play. We'll look forward to talking about that in 2 weeks. But is Tennessee a top 5 team? I don't know. Is Georgia a top 5 team? I don't know. Both of them, to me, got a lot of proving to do.
Well, we'll have 5 games in the SEC week 9 next week for you. So this has been Around the League from UGAsports.com. Florida, Georgia coming next week. Tennessee, Kentucky coming next week. Battle of the Columbias, Ole Miss and Texas A&M. A lot of narratives to be decided here in the SEC. We're able to do this because of our friends at Connor Grading and Landscaping and ASW Distillery. So please support the people who support us. For Jim Donnan and Brent Rollins, I'm Dayne Young. Thanks for joining us from Around the League from UGAsports.com, and we'll see you next week.